Dr. Adrian Hayes stood in the observation area overlooking Medical Bay 3, watching the Therassi medical team work with desperate intensity on a patient who was dying despite everything they were trying. He'd been called to the observation area by a colleague who thought his xenobiological expertise might provide some insight, though Adrian wasn't sure what insight he could offer that the Therassi doctors, some of the most skilled medical professionals in known space, hadn't already considered. The patient was Princess Selene Kar'vesh, youngest daughter of the Therassi High Council matriarch. Adrian knew her primarily through medical research papers she'd co-authored. She was a trained physician herself, working on regenerative medicine when she wasn't fulfilling diplomatic obligations. He'd cited her work in several of his own publications on comparative physiology. Now she was dying on the table in front of him. The accident had been catastrophic. Her diplomatic transport had suffered a critical systems failure that resulted in explosive decompression. Multiple casualties, but Princess Selene had survived the initial disaster only to arrive at Horizon's Edge Research Station in critical condition. Massive trauma, catastrophic blood loss, organ damage that was overwhelming even the Therassi's sophisticated medical technology. Adrian watched through the observation window as the medical team worked. They'd stabilized her initially, but now they were facing cascading failures. She needed blood transfusion urgently. Her circulatory system was failing, organs shutting down from lack of adequate perfusion. The problem was simple and devastating. There wasn't enough compatible Therassi blood available at Horizon's Edge. The accident had happened too far from major Therassi population centers, and emergency transport of compatible blood would take hours they simply didn't have. The Therassi medical team was trying synthetic blood substitutes, but Princess Selene's body was rejecting them. Immune complications from her injuries were making the synthetic alternatives ineffective. Her vitals continued to deteriorate despite their efforts. "They're out of options," Adrian's colleague, Dr. Yamara, said quietly. "Compatible blood won't arrive for another 90 minutes. She'll be dead in 20. Adrian watched the monitors displaying Princess Selene's failing vitals. Watched the Therassi head physician making decisions with the kind of desperate intensity that came from knowing you were losing a patient and having no good options left. His mind ran through everything he knew about Therassi physiology from years of xenobiological research: blood chemistry, cellular structures, oxygen transport mechanisms, immune response patterns, and something occurred to him. Something absurd, medically reckless, against every established protocol for cross-species medicine, but possibly, just possibly, a chance. Human and Therassi blood chemistry share some significant similarities, Adrian said slowly, his mind racing through research papers he'd written and read. Dr. Yamara looked at him like he'd lost his mind. "You're not seriously suggesting—" "I'm not suggesting anything yet," Adrian interrupted. "I'm stating a fact. Human and Therassi blood have remarkably similar oxygen-carrying mechanisms, compatible pH ranges, and cellular markers that aren't identical but aren't completely incompatible either. I've published research documenting these similarities." "Academic similarities," Yamara said. "Theoretically interesting but clinically irrelevant because no one's ever tried actual cross-species transfusion. The risks are enormous: immune rejection, toxic incompatibility, catastrophic cascade failures. All theoretical," Adrian said, "because no one's ever actually tried it when the alternative was letting someone die for lack of compatible blood." He watched Princess Selene's vitals drop another critical threshold, watched the medical team preparing for the worst, and he made a decision. Adrian left the observation area and entered Medical Bay 3. The Therassi medical team was too focused on their dying patient to immediately notice another person entering their workspace. "I can provide blood," Adrian said clearly, addressing the head physician. The room went silent. Every Therassi in the medical bay turned to look at him. Human blood, the head physician said, his tone suggesting he thought Adrian was either joking or having some kind of stress-induced breakdown. For a Therassi patient, that's not medically possible. The immune incompatibility alone would likely kill her faster than the blood loss. Maybe, Adrian admitted, or maybe human and Therassi blood are compatible enough to work temporarily. Buy you time to get actual Therassi blood here. My research on comparative physiology suggests the biochemistry is closer than anyone's ever tried to verify clinically. Your research was theoretical, the physician said. Academic observation about interesting similarities, not clinical recommendation for cross-species transfusion. You specifically noted the risks and unknowns in your conclusions. I know what I wrote, Adrian said. I also know she's dying right now. If we do nothing, she's dead in minutes. If we try human blood and it fails catastrophically, she's dead slightly faster. But if it works, even temporarily, you have time to get compatible Therassi blood here before her systems fail completely. He met the physician's eyes directly. I'm offering. It's my blood, my choice, my professional risk. If it kills her faster, that's on me and my judgment. But doing nothing when there might be a chance seems unconscionable. The Therassi physician looked at Adrian with an expression that combined shock, professional offense at such a reckless suggestion, and desperate awareness that there were no other options left. This is against every medical protocol, the doctor said. Unauthorized, untested, potentially catastrophic. She's dying right now, Adrian said simply. We're past the point where protocols matter more than trying anything that might work. The physician looked at Princess Selene's failing vitals, looked at the absence of any other viable options, looked at Adrian's absolute certainty that this was worth attempting despite all the reasons it shouldn't be possible. Prep him, the doctor said to his team. Standard transfusion setup with maximum filtration. We'll start with minimal volume and monitor for immediate rejection. If her immune system starts attacking the foreign blood, we stop immediately. Adrian was connected to transfusion equipment designed for compatibility between similar species, not for the kind of radical cross-species transfer they were attempting. His blood would flow through filters meant to remove obvious incompatibilities before reaching Princess Selene's circulatory system. The medical team positioned monitoring equipment to track every possible indicator of success or catastrophic failure. Immune markers, cellular compatibility, oxygen transport efficiency, signs of toxic reaction or rejection cascade. This is the most reckless thing I've done in 30 years of medical practice, the Therassi physician said quietly as they made final preparations. If this works, it will revolutionize emergency xenomedicine. If it fails, I may have just killed a member of the Therassi royal family through unauthorized experimental treatment. If we do nothing, she's definitely dead, Adrian pointed out. At least this way there's a chance. The transfusion began. Adrian watched his blood flow through the tubes, dark red human blood traveling toward a dying Therassi, about to enter a completely different species' circulatory system, in an act that every medical text said should result in immediate catastrophic rejection. Every eye in the medical bay was fixed on the monitors displaying Princess Selene's vitals. For the first 30 seconds, nothing changed. Her systems continued their slow collapse toward death, vitals falling steadily toward the thresholds that marked biological failure. Then, at 40 seconds, something shifted. Blood pressure stabilized. Not dramatically, just a subtle cessation of the steady decline that had marked the past 20 minutes. The monitors tracking oxygen saturation showed a fractional uptick. Movement in the right direction for the first time since the synthetic substitutes had failed. At 90 seconds, the change became undeniable to everyone watching. Princess Selene's vitals weren't just stabilizing, they were improving. Blood pressure rising toward sustainable levels. Oxygen saturation increasing as her cells received the perfusion they desperately needed. cellular markers indicating that her organs were responding to the increased blood flow. The Therassi doctor monitoring immune response looked at his displays with an expression of complete shock. No rejection cascade, no toxic markers. Her immune system is accepting the human blood as if it were compatible. The room went absolutely quiet. Everyone present understood they were witnessing something that shouldn't be possible according to everything medical science had established about cross-species compatibility. Human blood was saving a dying Therassi princess, working as well as or better than the synthetic substitutes that had failed, buying time that might mean the difference between life and death. Color began returning to Princess Selene's complexion, subtle but visible improvement from the gray pallor that had marked imminent organ failure. Her breathing, which had been labored and irregular, began to stabilize into more normal patterns. Adrian felt the blood leaving his body, flowing through the tubes, entering someone from a completely different species whose biology was apparently compatible enough with his own, that her body was accepting what it needed to survive. The transfusion continued for 12 minutes before the Therassi physician called it. That's sufficient volume. We've stabilized her enough to maintain basic function until compatible Therassi blood arrives. Disconnect him and monitor both patients. Adrian was disconnected from the transfusion equipment, immediately given fluids, and monitored for his own safety after losing a significant amount of blood. Princess Selene remained stable, not recovered, not out of danger, but alive when she would have been dead minutes ago without the human blood now circulating in her veins. Compatible Therassi blood arrived 47 minutes later, transported at emergency speed from the nearest major medical facility. The doctors began the careful process of replacing Adrian's blood with proper Therassi blood, gradually transitioning her system while maintaining the stability the human transfusion had created. Throughout the replacement process, Princess Selene's vitals remained stable. The human blood had bought exactly what Adrian said it would: time. Time for proper treatment to arrive. Time for her body to stabilize enough to accept standard Therassi medical intervention. Hours later, when Princess Selene was stable enough that the medical team could finally breathe and start processing what had happened, the Therassi head physician found Adrian in the recovery area where he was being monitored after the blood loss. "That was the most reckless thing I've ever witnessed in my career," the doctor said without preamble. "Unauthorized cross-species transfusion, completely untested in any clinical setting. Could have killed her through immune cascade, toxic incompatibility, or a dozen other catastrophic reactions we've never documented, because no one's ever tried anything this absurd." "But it worked," Adrian said quietly. "It worked," the doctor admitted, his tone carrying wonder mixed with professional shock. "Against all reasonable medical expectation, human blood proved compatible enough to stabilize a dying Therassi patient. Your theoretical research about similarities was apparently far more clinically relevant than anyone imagined." He paused. "You saved her life. If you hadn't offered your blood and insisted on attempting the transfusion, Princess Selene would be dead right now. That's undeniable fact. But you also created a situation that will have profound implications for xenomedicine, medical protocols, and interspecies relations, once word of this spreads beyond this station." "I know," Adrian said. "I considered that before I offered, decided that the chance to save her life mattered more than the complications that might follow." "Why?" the doctor asked. "You didn't know her personally, had never even met her beyond professional familiarity with her research. Why risk your career, your professional reputation, your own health to try something this reckless?" Adrian thought about how to explain a choice that had felt obvious in the moment despite being professionally and medically absurd. "Because she was dying, and I had something that might help, my blood, and theoretical research suggesting compatibility might be possible. Using that knowledge and that resource to just let her die when I could at least try to help seemed wrong. unacceptable, regardless of protocols or risks or professional consequences. The doctor studied him with an expression Adrian couldn't quite interpret. You're either remarkably compassionate or remarkably reckless, possibly both. Probably both, Adrian agreed. Over the following days, as Princess Selene recovered and Adrian underwent extensive medical monitoring to ensure the blood loss and transfusion process hadn't harmed him, the implications of what had happened began rippling outward. Medical researchers across multiple species wanted to study the case, how human and Therassi blood had proved compatible, what biochemical mechanisms made the transfusion work, what this meant for emergency medicine in mixed-species environments. The theoretical similarities Adrian had documented in academic papers suddenly had massive clinical relevance. His research was being cited in urgent communications between medical facilities, in emergency protocol revisions, in discussions about whether cross-species medical intervention previously considered impossible might actually be viable in extreme circumstances. Political analysts recognized that a human saving a Therassi princess through untested medical intervention carried diplomatic weight beyond purely medical implications. The Therassi government expressed profound gratitude while also grappling with the fact that their advanced medical technology couldn't save one of their own, but human biology and human willingness to take extreme risks apparently could. When Princess Selene was finally well enough for visitors beyond medical staff, she requested to speak with Adrian. He found her in a recovery suite that was comfortable but still clearly medical in nature, surrounded by monitoring equipment tracking her continued healing. "Dr. Hayes," she said, her voice still carrying some weakness from her ordeal. "Adrian, I've been briefed on what happened, how close I came to death, how human blood saved me when the Therassi medicine had exhausted its options, how you made a choice that was simultaneously medically reckless and personally courageous." "I'm glad you're recovering, Your Highness," Adrian said. "Selene," she corrected gently. "Given that your blood is currently keeping me alive, I think we can dispense with excessive formality." She paused. "You gave me your blood, risked your own health and safety for someone you'd never even met, violated established medical protocols to try something that could have killed me faster than the blood loss. Why?" Adrian considered how to explain what had seemed obvious at the time. "Because you were dying. And I had a resource that theoretical research suggested might help, my blood, and knowledge about human-Therassi biochemical similarities that had never been clinically tested. The choice was between using that knowledge to try to save you, or watching you die while I stood there with untested information that might have worked. I couldn't choose to let you die when I might be able to help," Adrian continued. "Regardless of protocols, risks, or professional consequences, that would have meant valuing my career safety more than your life. That seemed unconscionable." Selene looked at him with an intensity that suggested she was trying to understand this human, who'd given his blood to save a complete stranger from a different species. "You risked everything on a theory, on academic research that you yourself had noted was theoretical rather than clinically verified. The alternative was certain death," Adrian said. "Compared to that, trying an uncertain solution seemed worth the risks." "Thank you," Selene said quietly, "for your courage, for your compassion, for seeing a dying person who needed help rather than a diplomatic complication or a professional liability, for making a choice that saved my life when everyone else was constrained by what medical science said was possible." Months later, when Adrian's unauthorized transfusion had been thoroughly studied, when medical protocols had been carefully revised to include controlled cross-species blood transfusion as an option in extreme emergencies, when human-Therassi medical cooperation had deepened dramatically because of what was learned from Princess Selene's case, Adrian reflected on that moment in the medical bay. He'd offered his blood without certainty it would work, had violated every protocol to try something completely untested, had risked his career, his reputation, and possibly harmed a patient he was trying to save. And it had worked. Not just saved a life, but opened entirely new possibilities for medicine that hadn't existed before one human decided that letting someone die when he might be able to help was unacceptable regardless of what the established rules said was possible. Sometimes compassion becomes a bridge between species. Sometimes a single voluntary act of sacrifice alters medicine, politics, and destiny in the span of a heartbeat. And sometimes the most important medical breakthroughs happen because someone cares more about saving a life than about following rules that say saving that life shouldn't be possible. The monitors had changed. Science had been rewritten. And Princess Selene Kar'vesh was alive because a human had looked at theoretical research and decided that theory was worth testing when the alternative was watching someone die.